Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Tim Kirby Russia. Today with us we have Atul Aneja, an Indian journalist who I got to meet at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Atul, thank you very much for your time today. And could you tell us a brief bit about your career history? Because you've worked in a lot of places for a lot of years as a journalist. You are quite the veteran.
Well, that's not completely inaccurate because I joined journalism in 1991 and I worked for about more than 20 years, in fact, 25 years plus for the Hindu newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent about 12 years in West Asia, North Africa, between 2002 and till 2012, 2014, in fact. And then I spent 5 years in China. And I came out of China to India just after we had the COVID pandemic. So 17 years has been as an international journalist. So I've covered a lot of my area of specialization is conflict zones essentially. So I have done Afghanistan war and
Mm-hmm.
since 2001. Then we did the Hezbollah versus Israel 2006. Then, of course, the Palestine and Israel conflict,
Mm-hmm.
the Arabs, so-called Arab Spring from Benghazi, Egypt, Tunis. So essentially, you know, I had to go ahead with a good insurance policy because my always
I can imagine. I can imagine after all of that. So first, let's talk a little bit about the forum, and then we'll talk about your work because, of course, being someone so close to so many front lines, I'm sure you have a lot to say. But about the economic forum. So the first thing is, because there's no stated mission of the economic forum, right? It's not like on the wall they write the purpose of this is to do X, Y, and Z. So what do you think the purpose of this event was, and did it achieve said purpose?
Tim, it reflected a new world, the emerging world, really, a post-West world, I would say. And one could see the end of unipolarity, the unipolar world, because we didn't see that kind of domination of the Americans and the French
Mm-hmm.
and, the Brits, etc. It was not the Atlantic Alliance dominating this forum at all. I mean, they were nowhere.
No.
And here is a rising tide of history, which had a strong presence, of course, Russia being the host. In fact, I was telling a friend of mine while we were walking through the corridors of Space 24, but it was difficult to walk because there were so many people from so many nationalities and countries that look at Russia's isolation. I mean, what nonsense are they talking when they say Russia is isolated? Because the world was there in Space 24. And it was the emerging economy. As I said, China was there, India was there big time. You had Brazil over there, and the global south was there in full strength. So it had a completely new flavor of a post-West, post-COVID world order, to be honest. And BRICS countries being BRICS plus being so prominently represented. So for me, the biggest takeaway was to look at this thriving, rising alternative world. Uh, and of course the polarization which is taking place with the West, which is not going to lose its hegemony voluntarily, and here another set of countries which is determined to be part of a multipolar world where we say, okay, West, you are there. We are not saying that you are that the Americans or
Mm-hmm.
the Europeans are not there in the frame, but you are one of the important poles of a multipolar world order. There are other poles as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is the flavor of the new world order, which I got at Speed 24, and the sessions and the exhibition, everything reflected that spirit of a changing world.
Now, was this your first time in Russia, or have you been here previously?
Actually, I was there for the Russophile conference in February,
Ah,
and
that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So, but it's still basically the same year. So,
same.
what have been your impressions then of Russia? Because I was talking to some of our Chinese friends, and one of the things that I kind of got the vibe from Chinese people is they were all sort of like, um, there's so much space, there's so few people here. So that's kind of how Russia looked to Chinese people as being vast and kind of empty. How did it look to Indian eyes, this St. Petersburg, both around the forum, in the city, and again, you've been to the event in Moscow. How does Russia look to you guys?
So, you see, while I may have visited Russia only thrice, I did it in the mid-90s as well. But frankly, I'm not new to Russia. Because, you see, I started growing up at the time of the Soviet Union. And I remember I was in my 5th grade when we had the 1971 war for the liberation of Bangladesh. And it was India and the Soviet Union who had signed a treaty of peace and friendship at that time. We were key allies in that process. So, and the Soviet Union was a best friend in a way in the global system. So, as a child, as I was growing up, Russia was something and Soviet Union was something we knew. And I grew up reading Dostoevsky or Mikhail Sholokhov from what used to have the Soviet land stores, bookstores. Used to get good quality Russian literature at a very low price. And I remember mother reading, these books and fairy tales from the Soviet times, from the Russian tradition. So culturally, we were totally into Russia for the time of our growing years. But having come to the country, it's a vast place, and it's amazingly beautiful, and there is a sense of that there is this is a different, something like what happens when you go to a big country, even the United States, for example. Tim, you've been there. The feeling of vastness, of which sort of overwhelms you in a way. Second thing, which coming from India, is fewer people. In St. Petersburg, so many cars but less people, and a lot of green spaces. For me, these white nights was something very unique to see in St. Petersburg, when it would be dark only for a couple of hours. It was a very unique experience. Plus, then comes the culture and the art. It's not wrong to say that St. Petersburg has all the credentials of being the cultural capital of Europe. The Hermitage Museum, the canals. It's quintessential Europe in its prime. That's kind of impression I got from St. Petersburg. So this is, along with those winters, the first thing we came to know during our conversations was that it goes down to -40 in St. Petersburg. It gives you a very different feel, and frankly, I felt at home completely in Russia, and most importantly, are the people. Because, to be honest, if I had to go to Europe and apply for a Schengen visa, the kind of details I have to fill in my visa application form, reveal your personal assets, your property. You feel a sense of humiliation while going over there, as if somebody is doing you a favor when you go over there. But I felt in Russia so completely welcoming, right from the time of visa application. Small 2-page thing, essential information, making sure that no baddies get into your country. But that was it. And within a day, I got my visa. And once you are inside the country, you are welcomed. I see zero sense of racism, and that was so refreshing. And you felt welcomed around, when you met Russians. So it came from the heart. You can make out if somebody is faking it. It isn't. Yeah. So that's a very, very strong part of a beautiful Russian tradition as it is. And it was the case with the Soviet Union as well, because you had nationalities from Central Asia to Armenia, Caucasians, Tatars, So I think it's got a part of the Russian culture to be open-minded and to be welcoming of other nationalities who are not exactly like you. And that's the most refreshing thing I felt. And the first thing I came after coming back to New Delhi is, the next time, don't go and apply for a Schengen visa, go here, because you'll find everything in Russia, which you would find in Europe, but it'd be so much more welcoming and a pleasant experience.
Okay. Now let's talk a bit about your career, because I'm always fascinated by people who've seen things that I really haven't seen. And as someone who's been a sort of, I guess, war correspondent might be the correct way label, your position. What does the average person not understand about war? When you're sort of you said you've been in Tunisia, Israel, Palestine, Afghanistan. So how do things look when you're actually in a war zone versus how do people perceive it?
Tim, it's very important to understand the background to a particular war, because war is politics by another means. So you got to look at what is the bigger politics behind it. When I went to, let's say, Lebanon, 2006, war between Hezbollah and Israel, this was part of what Conde Rice at that time, U.S. Secretary of State or Defense Secretary of State, if I remember right, had made this statement that this is the birth pangs of a new Middle East. So you were trying to cement unipolarity at that time in different geographies of the world. And you did it in Eastern Europe with the breakup of Yugoslavia. And you moved into West Asia, North Africa after that, with knocking out of Saddam Hussein first. And that happened in 2003. So you had to understand the full cycle of what's going on after the Soviet collapse in 1991. That here was an empire which was trying to muscle itself and be the global hegemon, and was going across various geographies. So then one could locate a small conflict into the bigger picture. I think reading the bigger picture for me was the most challenging. So that's important, that this is a subset of a bigger dynamic which is taking place. And it had to be, what was happening in Lebanon had to be connected to what happened to Yugoslavia. And that sort of gave you perspective. So that's how you don't look at war just as the violence which is taking place and the fear it breeds, etc. But the bigger focus is on, are those war goals being achieved by the aggressor, or has the defender managed to stave off that particular attack, which usually is on their sovereignty and their independent way of thinking. And that's how you also gauge that beyond the violence, who is winning and who is losing the war. And that's held me in good stead. Because I think the Israelis lost that war in 2006 with Hezbollah, because they could not knock out the Hezbollah. They could not achieve their war goals, and essentially had to get back to where they began. And same goes further on. If you look at the Iraq war, you knocked out Saddam Hussein, but instead of US being the hegemon, it's Iran which has become the hegemon, because the Shia population in Iraq and Iran have just sort of come together, and the Americans are nowhere. So George Bush declared mission accomplished, but frankly, if you look deeper, I mean, it starts from the Vietnam War onwards, but you see it here, over here.
Well, yeah, the thing is, with mission accomplished, if the mission was to kill Saddam Hussein, well, that mission was accomplished. But some sort of bizarre idea that we could transform Iraq into, somewhere that's like America was not going to happen. Russians actually ask me all the time about this. I've done so many talk shows where I have to explain to them that in the American mindset, because in our opinion, after World War II, Germany, West Germany, and Japan became like new Americas, that this model should work everywhere. That we can go to war with someone, we'll defeat them, and they'll wake up and be like, oh, we should become like Americans. If you listen to Colonel Douglas MacGregor, he says that actually the Germans and Japanese were the ones who transformed themselves more so than us. But anyways, that's sort of where this bizarre logic comes from. But anyways, I kind of cut you off there, sorry.
No, so as someone who's following and writing about it, about wars, I think the bigger story is really what fascinated me, apart from your personal survival. And that's interesting because there's a certain pattern of the way things are being fought. I'll give you just this Lebanon example very quickly. You see, what was happening was that the Hezbollah was firing its missiles at Haifa. Okay, that's the Israeli port on the Mediterranean. And the Israelis were attacking southern Beirut, which was the Hezbollah stronghold. And the rest of the Christian Maronite area was being spared where my hotel was. So long as these rules of the game, you have to read that as a war correspondent. What are the rules, how it's going? Then one fine day, I heard that the Hezbollah had fired a missile at Tel Aviv. So that day, the rules changed. And I called my driver. I said, you take me to Damascus tomorrow morning. because now this is going bizarre. If they attack Tel Aviv, the Israelis are going to attack any part of Beirut. So time to get out. So, and that's exactly what happened. By next morning, the entire Beirut was being bombed by the Israelis. It's another story of how I managed to get out and reach Damascus. But that's another thing from a very practical point of view, from a war correspondent, is to read the fine print within the conflict, and then decide on what you want to do. You want to stay on, or you want to leave, or whatever. But that's another thing which you head all the time while you are there. Apart from the bigger picture, which you must read, it's fascinating stuff in a way. You see history being made, and or attempts to change history are there, but it has its own logic. It doesn't exactly work out according to the script.
Okay, well, see, one of the things I want to then ask you is a little bit about the nuts and bolts of how this works. So, okay, we'll take the Israel-Palestine conflict. We can mix it also with Lebanon and all that. So your employer sends you, over there. You're still paid a salary, right, to go and cover this war. But, just saying cover this war is a pretty simple statement. How do you go to a foreign country where I presume you don't speak the language and talk to people who are fighting? How do you build trust with them to allow you to speak with them? Where do you get your information from? How do you conduct this operation, basically?
Well, the first thing is to get into the war zone. I mean, that's something which is the most challenging. So, which means you have to get the visa for the place. In the case of Iraq, for example, 2003, 2004, I had a visa for Jordan. So I reached Jordan, and then from Jordan to the Iraqi border, there is an exit stamp from Jordan. You're moving towards Iraq, but there's no entry stamp in Iraq because those guys had bolted from the place, from the immigration. So technically, I have not entered Iraq.
Oh, well, that could present some problems later. Okay,
later on. So far, I survived because that was 2003 and or so.
Well, yeah, that's the same situation on the territory of like Ukraine's 1991 borders. Any person who enters that part of now Russia and were to enter the other part of Ukraine could be subject to arrest and a prison sentence for that. So yeah, that's that kind of forces you then to kind of pick one side in a conflict, doesn't it?
Yeah, see, that is very clear. In my case, I thought, since that Saddam was a secular, strong leader, we had a great energy relationship as an Indian. Mm-hmm. So and it was not with the Americans. So it was very, very clear that which way you belonged. I think that's essential. Second thing which happened, Tim, is that I was a print journalist, so I didn't have to carry my camera or anything around. So I did not join the international corps, which would be sort of ensconced in some particular hotel.
Yeah.
I recall that was a Palestine hotel in Baghdad. So I contacted the ambassador, let's say, in Iraq, and I said, where should I stay? And he says, don't stay in one of those fancy hotels, just keep a low profile. And he told me, there's one hotel called Hammurabi Hotel. Just go there and check in there. I don't know why he told me. So quietly, I just went inside. But the drive from Jordan to that 1,600 kilometers along a beautiful highway, and looking at crossing the Euphrates, it was a great experience in itself, apart from anything else. So then once you are there, then you got to travel. And that's where you hire a car. And so somebody has to tell you that this particular driver is trustworthy. So that's a bit of a thing you got to do. And since that was an Arab-speaking country, it had to be in Arabic.
Yeah.
Arabic translator as well, to translate from there. So the best thing was then to just drive through and look at the graffiti. That's the first clue what you get. Because I'll give you an example. We just moved out of Baghdad and I was traveling towards Najaf, which is the Imam Ali shrine. And this is the core Shia area, Kufa and Najaf. That's where the Battle of Karbala was very close by, where the famous battle where Hussein is killed, but in a very, very heroic circumstances. So that was the kind of feel of the place. But as we got out of Baghdad, and I saw a graffiti which said Iraq first.
Oh. Uh-huh.
I said, and then I probed it because this translator of mine, for example, was earlier in Saddam's army. So he was an officer there, so he knew English, he knew his politics. So then he explained to me that it was so Arab, pan-Arab, that is, Iraq was so pan-Arab that the identity was pan-Arab identity. But now they're saying that we are for Iraqis first, and then, so that particular ideology had been shared by this time, that you're looking at your country first and not for the entire grouping. So it sort of then made me investigate the history of it, how things had evolved so you go background. So you partly have to do your research with clues which you see from the ground, because there are not very many people who are going to talk to you at this time. There are no organized briefings which are taking place. Mm-hmm. And then once you reach Najaf, and then to me, it was an eye-opener, because here was the shrine and next to it was shrapnel all over, because there was a bombing where one of the Shia leaders had been killed. So there had been a suicide bombing there along with that. So then you start figuring out, talking to just ordinary people, and then try and weave out a story exactly how things might have happened. Little bit of speculation at times. And then you got to see briefings in world capitals, etc., what is happening. So you weave a micro event into a evolving bigger picture, and use your best judgment to say something. And of course, pictures are very important here to sort of, give a feel to the reader as to what the situation is on the ground. So that's how it goes, Tim. So a lot of it is comes through. A lot of local media sometimes help. They know more than what comes in so-called international media. That is also important, to find a good center, nerve center from where local media is filing its stories. Internet was a huge issue over there. So to find them and look at the Iraqi perspective on events that was taking place.
Well, now, one thing then is like with the Western media, right? In the Ukraine war, we all know whose side they're on, right? In the Israel-Palestine war, it's obvious whose side they're on. But when you're talking to people, how do they react to Indian media? Like, because your guys' media, from what I've seen anyways, I'm definitely not an expert, there seems to be a much more broader, grayer view of the world than in the West. So how do people react? They're like, oh, you're from India, I'll talk to you. Or are they very suspicious of you?
Not at all. You see, that's where the Indian soft power, I think, has been amazing. And this was built over since 50s, 60s, when we were part of the non-aligned movement, especially in the global south and the developing countries. So that is something, and we didn't have too much money, Tim, but we had a program called iTech, which was essentially giving small scholarships to people to study in Indian universities, in our defense military establishment. So we trained a lot of people from Zambia, Tanzania, Kenya, who came to India, became officers and went. That's the military side of it. Then our universities were open to them, and our technical institutes were there. And that has created a sort of a special sort of feeling towards the Indians. And that's, I found all over the Arab world, right? Got out of Queen Alia Airport in Jordan, and there was a taxi coming, and there was a Jordanian in front of me. He looked back. He said, "Are you from India?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "No, you go first." Oh. So it just gestures like that. Or I had to find a Royal Jordanian airline office to change my ticket in Aqaba, which is very close to Eilat, which is Israel. You could see that Eilat on the other side of the Mediterranean, and there was a group of Jordanians who were there, and I said, I want to know where the airline office is. So one of them walked with me, and I just started talking. I said, he said, do you know anything about India? He said, no, I studied in Pune in some place. So in Aqaba, I found this resonant, something which resonated with India. So I think that's a huge thing, because Nehru and others were very, very international in their perspective. Bandung Conference, non-aligned movement, with Tito in Yugoslavia and with Nasser in Egypt. We had some fantastic relationship in the 50s, 60s, and that continued to the 70s. I think after India's reform, we sort of became more inward looking to the West. So I'm not sure how long this inertia of the past will last. But so far, so good. You are very welcome in these geographies,
Uh-huh.
which is basically the global South, Middle East, Central Asia. Central Asia, Raj Kapoor films are still resonating. There's an actor called Mithun Chakravarti. I mean, Kyrgyzstan, I landed, and this guy asked me, "Do you know Mithun Chakravarti?" I said, he's not a big popular hero in India, but for some reason he stuck a chord over there. So there's a Bollywood angle which comes into
Well,
it.
yeah, because in the Soviet Union, certain Bollywood films were sort of allowed to be imported to the Soviet Union, and they all became explosive, huge hits.
Absolutely.
In fact,
In fact, that's
I used to
yeah,
work with some audio engineers, and they were two brothers, Sanjay and Vijay, but they were Russian guys. But their parents
right.
loved the Bollywood movies so much that they gave them Indian names. But anyways,
Indian names, look at
yeah,
that.
yeah.
No, in fact, I got my visa extended in Beirut because of that. Because I didn't know where to go, and I went to the immigration office, and there was a captain there. He said, "I'll help you, but you have to do something for me." I said, "What?" He says, "I need CDs of Hindi films. So if you
Oh,
can give that to me, then your visa gets extended." And that's exactly what happened. So when I
oh,
went back to Dubai, where I was stationed, so I sent him those CDs. But
mm,
that's how things are. So the
mhm.
people to people connect of India's of the 60s, 70s, and 80s was amazing. I think that's what's helping us to go on till now.
Well, you
You
said
know,
you feel welcome in the global South for the most part, but then
absolutely.
Are Indian journalists welcome in the West, or does the West sort of look down on you guys as sort of like second class, third
It,
class?
it, it depends really, because Indians in America have done well. We have a professional class which has gone into that. So, it's
Hmm.
basically doctors, software guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're into Google, and so it's a little better, to be honest. Because frankly, I never had a people with American people.
Hmm.
No problem with the American people, to be honest.
Yeah.
Generally,
Me either.
so yeah, yeah, yeah. They're friendly, nice, and open-minded. I quite like their open-minded culture, but I'm not sure it's the same in the UK or it's the same in France or Germany.
Mm.
Um, a lot of people who have gone there. I have not visited those countries much, to be honest. So I don't know. I don't have that much of first-hand experience. But there is an issue out there, and especially now with globalists coming in, you know, your World Economic Forum type of crowd, extreme elitism, which is going on
Hmm.
in the West, and this class consciousness increasing more and more. I think we are going to have a problem.
My question was about so what does India actually want out of the BRICS, out of the rise of the multipolar world? Because I can say for Russia's standpoint of being involved in so many wars and really being one of the we can't exactly argue who's the biggest victim, but definitely Russia's been a massive victim of this sort of global hegemony. The 1990s were as destructive to the population and society as the Russian Revolution was. It's, Russia wants freedom from that. Freedom from these constant wars and meddling in their society and this and that. What do you guys in India want? Why has your civilization chosen to put its money down on this new method of international relations?
First thing, Tim, is that we recognize that the world has changed. It's no longer either the bipolar world which existed when the Soviet Union and the West and the US were the real drivers of the global system, and then you had this unipolar area where US was driving the global agenda for a very long time, and that was not a great thing for us. Uh, the coming of a multipolar world that gives us so much more room for our own rise and growth. And that's what BRICS represents. It represents the other layer between the core global south and the developed world, which are the emerging economies, which have fairly good economic heft and influence. So it gives us an opening to grow much more independently with the way we want to do things, and we also want to not really set the agenda, but this whole debate about rule-based world order. We are nothing opposed to the making of a rule-based order. But who makes the rules? Do those rules help us, or we are the followers of those rules which are dictated to us? But in the BRICS coming in, we probably Russia, India, China, Brazil, we can actually make the rules of the world order. So that's a huge opportunity which is coming our way. Just the world has opened out to us. And we see that we are a civilization state, just as Russia and China is. That we can really, it's a revivalist kind of a tendency that we can come into our own, something which we had lost during the era of colonialism because West imposed the entire agenda, that we have something to say and something to contribute to the global system. And that can happen only if the BRICS is at the front end of driving the global agenda. The center of gravity has shifted to the BRICS. It helps us. And it helps us to come together with like-minded powers who do not look down upon us. I think it's a great decolonization of the mind which takes place with the BRICS. You as if a burden is off of you, that you're not looking over your shoulder at a Westerner. You are
That's
your own
happened a
people.
lot in Russia since I've been here. I came here in 2006, and now it's 2024. The sort of mental decolonization has become very extreme. People act because, again, as a foreign person with a very thick accent, sadly, people react to me as being this sort of living representation of the West more so than as an individual person. And they used to basically almost want to bow on their knees before me. And now people are just sort of like, kind of push you away. It's very different.
Yep. And also, it gives you room to express yourself. Like India, for example, is at its core a Vedic civilization. On top of the layers of Islam and Christianity are also embedded into our DNA. And I think we need to bring that up in a way with the Chinese civilization, for example, which is again thousands of years old with its own DNA, and the Russian Orthodox on the other side. I think what we are now wanting to do is really have this dialogue among the civilizations, so that what Professor Dugin talks about, the ideology of a multipolar world. Yeah. I think we need to work that out, and this is a new dialogue which will start, which is historic. It's a conversation which I think has just begun, because multipolar world one is, with the BRICS building connectivity. You have transport corridors. We have the north-south corridor, energy corridors, transport links, railways. Physically, we come together. That's one dimension of it. But we need to come together philosophically and emotionally. And that's a lot of heavy lifting, which still has to be done, so that we develop a language which gives us a collective sense of identity, a BRICS identity.
Well, I think that's what Professor Dugin actually did pretty well, because he gave his speech. He said that each of us has our own absolute, as in our own sort of absolute truth. Because one thing that is kind of was sort of the plan of globalism is that, maybe you guys have, your Hinduism and Jainism down there, but it's all the same basically, and there's no differences, and it doesn't matter. Whereas in the multipolar world, these differences do matter, but we have our sort of Eastern Orthodox Christian truth here, and you guys have your Hindu truth there, and they're both true. We don't have to accept your ways, you don't have to accept our ways, but we have to say, hey, you're going to do things in your civilization that way, we do things this way here, and I think that's the new dynamic. So that was something very important, and I don't remember him saying that previously, so perhaps this is a new revelation.
This is amazing, because in the under the cover of globalization, it was supposed to be just one uniform culture all over the world. We were not appreciating the cultural terrain really, and differences within that. And while you have your differences, to find a common denominator of cooperation. I think that's the interesting part. We are giving space to each other. Each civilization has to flower on its own, yet collaborate and dialogue and cooperate with each other. I think that's where we are at right now, because the multipolar world has emerged, but it's not to its own right now. And that's the task which we need to do. The BRICS have made up their banks. There's one in Shanghai which will do the geoeconomic side of it. But the geocultural side of it, I think that's something which we need to do right now. And I think the coming decade is going to be fascinating. We all look forward to the BRICS summit in Kazan, because a lot of these ideas
yeah.
are putting and sort of will start getting crystallized in the years to come.
Yeah, I'm really hoping I'll get to attend that, but we'll see if I get invited. But anyways, Atul, Aneja, thank you very, very much for your time. This was great. Is there anything like some sort of social media you'd like to promote, or any projects you need to promote that you'd like people to go and check out, or some way they can get in touch with you? Or
Yeah, absolutely. See, I'm there on Twitter, which will be great for people to connect at Atul Aneja, and that's it. And so that will be wonderful. I also just started a Substack called surprising. You may be surprised. It's called Caspian Undercurrents. Well, I'm fascinated by the Caspian and its hinterland, which comes actually right up to India. It's the Eurasian landmass with India there prominently, which is there as part of my Substack. Just started, so I would like people to join in and contribute their ideas, because it's something in the making right now. I don't have any fixed ideas, but as we collaborate and talk to like-minded people from these geographies, I'm very excited about it.
All right. Well, then I'll try to put those links in the description. They should be easy to find. Thank you very much for your time. And friends, thank you very much for being on the program with us today. See you in the next episode of Tim Kirby Russia.